Welcome back, everyone. Well, as many of you know, one of the things that fascinates me so much about living here is the sense of history. And if you've been watching some of the interviews lately, we've been delving into the history of our area. Well, you also know that in 2014, Best Motion Picture for the Year for the Academy Awards was 12 Years a Slave. What you might not know is that the story of Solomon Northrop, which that movie is based on, lived in this area, was an abolitionist, was a slave, captured slave, kidnapped, freed, and wrote that book. Well, joining me today is Paul McCarty. Now, Paul is the executive director and historian with the Old Fort House Museum in Fort Edward. So welcome, Paul.
Well, good morning and welcome. Thanks for having us on the show.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I'll get the Sir Paul McCarty joke out of the way first, okay, just in case. Dangerously close to somebody in that band, that obscure British band. This is an absolutely amazing story, somewhat poignant given recent events in our country, let's face it. Let's first tell our viewers a bit about who Solomon Northrop was.
Well, Solomon Northup was a free black man. He was actually born free in Minerva around 1808. And his father, Mintus, moved around quite a good deal, but then ended up locating himself down in Fort Edward sometime prior to 1818. So we know that Solomon's younger years and years when he was in school and becoming a young man, he was basically brought up in Fort Edward.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And the home that he lived in, you know, if you recall the movie, they positioned his wealth, his status, as probably higher than it was, right?
Much higher.
Yeah,
much higher. I mean, the clothing was over the top.
Yeah, right.
So,
Hollywood at work, right?
Yes, it was.
But truth be told, born in this area, in the Saratoga area, Fort Edward area, around there, simple means growing up and whatever, but was a teacher? Was he a teacher?
No.
No, he wasn't, but
No.
I know he played the violin.
He played the violin, and,
Right.
you know, pretty much probably on the violin was somewhat self-taught, I'm sure.
Yes, right.
But that was one of his, as he says in his book, it was one of the ruling passions of his youth.
Yes, right.
He loved the violin, and he could read and write. In the book, he quotes his father as saying that he was made available the best education that his father could afford.
Right. Now, at that time also, public education didn't exist, so you had to actually pay to have your child. Now, again, think about living in near poverty, very simple life and whatever, but Mintus is his father, right?
Correct.
You know, paid to have his son educated. Solomon's wife was an in-demand chef or cook, right?
And Hampton.
And he was in Saratoga with her when those two gentlemen convinced him to go to New York with them, kidnapped him, and took him to Louisiana.
Right.
Wow.
They were living here in Saratoga, but during that period of time, Ann Hampton, Northup, had a job in Sandy Hill working as her cook for one of the what was called Cheryl's Coffee House.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
No kidding. Now, so Solomon was drugged and kidnapped, that part's true, even in the movie, and taken to Louisiana.
Correct.
Where he remained for 12 years.
Exactly.
Now, how did he get out of there?
Well, that's very interesting because he was basically helped by a Canadian carpenter who he was working with on this plantation where he was. Basically, Solomon was not adept at picking cotton. And basically, if you're familiar with how to pick cotton, you have to pull it out of a bowl. And the bowl has points on it that can become, you know, prick you.
Exactly.
And his hands would become a bloody mess.
Right.
So he could not pick as much cotton.
He was a musician.
He was a
violinist,
musician.
you know?
He did other things. He was not
Right.
brought up to do that. So very often the master of the plantation would find other things for Solomon to do. And so he found that he was a fairly adept in the building trades. So he had Solomon assist with actually the building of his house. The movie shows a gazebo, but he was actually working on the master's house.
Now, we'll cut through some of the facts here. A member of his family, maybe a grandnephew or something like that, got involved with that Canadian to get a letter written to get him back up here into New York.
Basically, the Canadian wrote the letter. It came back up to this area, was forwarded to Henry B. Northup, who was a lawyer. He was the grandnephew of Captain Northup, who manumitted Mintus Northup, Solomon's father, and gave him his freedom. They were both, Solomon and Henry B. were both born at about the same time. There were 2 or 3 years difference in their age. So as youngsters, they would have grown up together and played together.
Yeah, got it. Okay. It's a little fuzzy how Solomon Northrop passed away when the book became, when he published the book, it became known, and he went on a speaking tour, someplace in New England, they think. He had a fondness for liquor, and so nobody really knows, right?
Right.
But where he's buried or when he actually passed.
No, we have no exact idea. There's been a lot of research done. There's still research being done. So we kind of lose track of him about the year 1863 or so.
Got it. Wow.
After that period of time, we were just not sure what exactly happened.
Boy, look, at Fort Edward, at the old Fort House Museum, which is right on Route 4.
Right.
In Fort Edward, this Saturday, all day, is the Solomon Northrop Day. Now, this is the 18th annual, so this has been going on. It's a tradition now. But there, Jonathan Newell, who you know is a friend of ours, is playing some music. Cliff Oliver, who is a reenactor and very accomplished, plays Solomon Northrop. Paul here plays a role himself in this. So not only can you learn a lot of facts about Solomon Northrop, but staged in a way that's a very compelling story. The story is compelling enough to start with. But so that's happening this Saturday in Fort Edward at the old Fort House Museum. Now, it's free, right?
It is free. Everything all day is free.
Okay.
Yep. The museum will be open for free tours in the afternoon during the period of time when we're having a walking tour at 10, and then a presentation by Cliff Oliver and myself. After that, then the place will be open after Jonathan's performance.
Boy, make a point of this. It's you know, let's face it, we're living in very trying times, and to have a perspective, especially perspective in history, right in our area, I think is particularly important. Well, Paul, thank you very much for coming in. It's great to see you.
Glad to be here.
And to see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.